If you work in enterprise security today, then you know how important your network is to dealing with threats and dealing with some of the compliance issues that have gotten pretty intense recently. What I want you to do is I want you to stick around because I've got an expert here in the studio with me. We're going to talk about networks and exposure and vulnerability and tech, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So stick around, I think you'll learn something. Hi, I'm Ed Amoroso from TAG. I want to welcome you to our discussion today. I have a friend of mine and one of the industry's icons in cybersecurity. He's been around for a while. We're going to pick his brain on the work he's doing today with a company called RedSeal. It's Gregory Enriquez, who's the CEO of RedSeal. And I asked him to come by because this is a really, really big topic for a lot of you watching. And we're going to learn a new phrase. We're going to learn about network exposure management, which I think is going to be more important to your program this year than maybe you'd expected. So Greg, nice to see you. Welcome to New York.
Good to see you, Ed. Great to be here on a beautiful day.
Oh, you betcha, you betcha. So I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, but just to start, maybe just a thumbnail on RedSeal, a little bit about what you guys do, and then we'll talk about some technology.
Sure. So RedSeal is focused on network exposure management. It comes in the category of you can't protect what you don't know. So RedSeal does four things. We focus on those four things. It's building out a model of your network.
Yep.
It is also prioritizing vulnerabilities, which security teams have to do every day. It is also understanding the attack paths in your network so you know what happens when you do have a bad day. And then finally, it's continuous compliance. So understanding your network and then staying in compliance with whichever regulators you're dealing with, whether it's CIS or PCI or DISA-STIGs, whichever it may be.
That can't see what you can't, or can't secure what you can't see, is something that's been true the whole time, right? There's a lot of things have changed in cybersecurity. In fact, everything's changed. But that's one thing that hasn't, right? Like having an inventory and an understanding is step one, right?
It is step one. I think for any risk executive, when you come on the job, the first thing you need to know is, what do I have to do? Who do I have and what do I have to protect? So RedSeal is focused on making sure you can go back and look through your organization and understand what you have, what it's connected to, whether it can get to the outside or someone from the outside can get to it. And that's a key job. And there's a number of people employed in a large organization making sure that the network inventory is accurate and kept up to date, and it's a daunting challenge. And so we help companies improve their posture and understand what they have.
That's so good. You know, we're going to talk about network modeling in a minute, but if somebody doesn't really get network modeling, is it reasonable to think that it's sort of like a way of building a map or an inventory that you wish you had, but you probably don't, so you almost have to go back and do something you probably should have done a while ago, but most companies really never did, meaning build a map of what you got. Am I saying that right? Do I have that right?
I think you are. I think it was last year there was an IBM Ponyman study. It said about 33% of network assets are unknown, unmanaged, and unprotected.
Wow.
Almost 100% of the time we go into an environment and we turn on RedSeal, we're going to identify assets that the company isn't aware of. Especially when you go into environments such as an electric utility or another manufacturing where you have IT and OT, and you believe those networks may be separated. When we go in and look, maybe there's paths or assets that are on the wrong side or are not separated or protected. But most of the time we're going to find assets that are unknown, whether they're network assets, workstation assets, and that's the beginning. That's where you spend a lot of time, and I think network security engineers know they spend a lot of hours understanding what's out there. But when it becomes most urgent, remember, in the world of cybersecurity, we're focused on alert to fix. How fast, once I get alerted, how fast can I contain it or fix it? And that is going to go much better when you know what you have and what it's connected to, and that's what we're focused on.
It gives everybody a common sort of mental image of what we're dealing with, you know, instead of everybody flying off of a different sort of baseline understanding.
No, you said a key point there. Yeah. So having a model, especially having an image, humans have a tough time looking at lists, and it'd be hard for you to describe the phone book and what's in it. But when you see a picture, you see a map of the world, you can understand how things are related. And what RedSeal will do is we'll go into your environment, we'll pull all of the network configs. We have the capability to understand everything that's there, even if you don't tell us it's there, and then build a visual map of what's there and then draw the connections between each thing so you can take action. So understanding how your cloud is connected to your on-prem, or how your on-prem is connected to the DMZ or to a third party. So giving you that, going back and looking at your environment, giving you a visualization of what's there, and then an idea of how it's all connected, and then being able to take actionable, get actionable results by using that information is what we're about.
So you said at the beginning exposure management on the network exposure. So that suggests that a primary motivation here in building the map is look for holes, right? I mean, but it seems like there's a lot of other things you could do, but you and I both work in cyber, so obviously that's our discourse. But talk to me about that. Exposure management is something that seems to be coming up more and more and more. I hear that phrase a lot. Is that something with your customers that they resonate with, this idea of finding exposure in their infrastructure?
It is. I think we're in an era now of proactive security, making sure that we are locked down and that we understand where we might have exposures so we can close those before something bad happens. I think we've been in a long time of breach mitigation and active security, so if someone gets in, we want to know what to do. I think exposure management falls in the category of let's make sure that we're locked down so no one can get in. Now we know there's always ways for people to breach a system, and they're going to find it, but you want to start with the basics, and the basics are making sure that your network assets are locked down and you've mitigated all exposures. So exposure management can start with scoping and understanding the model and what's in your environment. Then it can go to prioritizing vulnerabilities so that you take the vulnerabilities that are known and you fix the ones that are most critical first, which means they have to be rated according to your network. So something might have a high CVSS score if it were exposed to the external, but in your environment it's not. It's firewalled off and locked down. It's no big deal. Whereas something else may matter to you. So understanding and being able to prioritize those vulnerabilities is very important in your environment. And then understand the attack paths. If something does happen, what is the blast radius? Where can they go from there? And what do I need to lock down if something bad happens? Remember, we're trying to get from alert to fix in the shortest amount of time.
So so I drop your software into my environment. It's all automatic and automated and just kind of runs, or is there a lot of human curation that's
So
needed
to
here?
get started, we're going to want to pull the configs off of all of your network devices, so firewalls, routers, switches. And you can do automated discovery, so we can put the software and turn it on.
It finds all that stuff.
It finds all that. It will, we have very large capacity, so we can read thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of firewall rules to understand what connections are available. So it gets technical,
nice.
but just understand that when you
I
start
like to have that when I started in telecom 30 years ago. We went wandering around, looking for that stuff manually.
So we have some very large environments and we have some very simple environments. Also, when you have M&A, which is common, whether you're acquiring companies or merging companies, you're bringing two IT organizations together, and understanding which each has is very important. So yes, you can put in RedSeal. We'll get started with you. We pull the configs off of all your devices. We put that together in a model of your network, and then we move on to understanding what your policies are. So now you get into the audit category. Audit, is about doing what we say we're going to do. So now we're going to map to industry standard policies and your own policies, and we have the ability to give you our own business practice checks, or you can write them as you go along. So know what you have, be able to understand what happens as you move through your network, and then live to the policies that you set and the compliance that you're held to.
Awesome. If you're going to make a sales call and you walk in the room and door number one is the security team, door number two is the network team, which do you go to, or do you go to both?
I actually need to go to door number one, door number two, and door number three.
What's number three?
The DevOps team.
Oh, you got them too.
So when you're in the cloud environment,
three salespeople to make a call.
You need to understand how it works through all three. So yes, we work closely with the network team, the network security team, and the DevOps team, because we are looking across your environment in a hybrid world, which we live in today, which is the cloud, the on-prem network, and the IT team.
I don't think it's controversial to say that at one point those teams were very different, very siloed. Is it getting a little better when you're out selling? They're kind of working together, those groups, or do they still tend to be a little siloed?
I think you do see silos. It depends on the organization. I think you know better than anybody that we've gone through various stages of cybersecurity and the role of the risk executive and where that reports and who has an interest. As you know today, with the problems that corporations face and even administrative or political organizations face, that they're getting attacked on all fronts. It can be ransomware, it can be nation state attacks for all kinds of problems, but they are faced with these challenges, and therefore the network team, the security team, the DevOps team, everybody needs to be aware and concerned about security.
Oh, that's good to hear. You sell a lot of platform to government, like to FedGov and to different agencies and even commands, I would imagine. This feels very, very consistent with a lot of the goals of government groups.
It is. I mean, we are in corporations and governments, and in the federal government we serve the military, the intelligence, and the administrative community. So we're in all 6 branches in the military, so from Space Force to the Coast Guard.
Right.
And I think that that's inherent in our mission and what we do, and our mission is to protect corporations and governments from bad things happening. And by implementing proactive security with exposure management, hitting those key 4 areas, we think we hit the basics on what's needed to protect your environment. So that's what's made us successful over a long period of time and kept large and small organizations committed to RedSeal.
When people drop the platform into their environment, what do they report back in terms of vulnerabilities to you guys later? Do they find that they drop the? Because one thing is when you shed a black light on things, sometimes the number of problems you see goes up because now you see what you have. But I'm curious what the experience is. Is it sort of like a lumpy sort of thing where when I first see my model, I see a lot more vulnerabilities, and then over time I bring it down, or what's sort of the shape of that curve for people who are thinking of buying the platform? What should they expect?
It's a great question.
I would imagine you must see more in the beginning than you knew about before.
Yeah, and I think nobody likes surprises. Yeah. So we do drop into a customer's environment, and we will find unintended connections or unintended exposures.
Stuff they didn't know about before.
Right, right. And often there's denial. That can't be right. That can't be right. That's not open. That's not. How can someone have a bad password, or how
like an east-west thing, a path you didn't know existed,
path they didn't know
connected
about
to some cloud, and you go, "Whoa, I'm connected to that."
Right.
It's probably like that.
That is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Often they'll find devices in the network they didn't know about, networks they didn't know about. So you'll see. Always will find devices they didn't know about. So exposed ports, there's all kinds of things that we're going to shine a light on, which can be a challenge. Back to the first question.
You need a little counseling session after you run the platform.
It can be a challenge because you are dealing with network security and DevOps. So you don't want to start shining on other people's problems. You want to work together on this. So part of RedSeal is to go in and have a plan to make sure we understand what the end goal is, what is the most valuable return for what we're doing with the customer, and what the interests are of that environment. What do you need to know? Are you doing this to get an inventory? Are you doing it to pass an audit? Are you doing it to understand the attack path so you're ready when you are exposed? What is your objective for RedSeal? Because we do a number of things, but the most important is that we want to be able to model your network and always be able to give you that information on what happens if something changes or something is exposed.
That's fantastic. So if somebody's watching, they say, all right, I'm sold. How do they buy? Like, is it a POC usually in the beginning, or you just deploy in stages? What's typical buyer's experience sort of like?
Yeah, so we're focused as a supplier of tools and solutions on seeing the best time to value, right? And you know from being in this market,
you want that to be
you want
fast.
something to come in, you want to see results, and you want to be able to measure those results.
Right.
And then you want to be able to maintain that environment so you continuously, because
Yeah.
networks change.
Right.
They change more often than people map them or model them. So the experience is to bring in the software. It's going to run in a VM or it can run in the cloud, and they're going to bring in the software. We're going to help them understand what they need to do.
Like,
to
do you look at a portion and then more and more, or do you look at the whole thing all at once? What's typical sort of engagement?
The greatest value is going to come out of looking at the whole thing.
Just start running and look around.
We can start with a portion, but if you're looking at the entire environment, you're going to get
Just
the
rock
best
and roll.
results.
Yeah.
And so we're going to assist the customer in making sure that they're pulling in all the configs that they need to pull in, that their model is complete. And we actually do something called a digital resilience score, and that is scoring the completeness of your model and a number of other factors to give you a score on how well you're doing. Am I always getting all my devices in the model? So that way when I do my vulnerability scanning and then I have to prioritize those vulnerabilities, I make sure that I have everything. So we have an executive view, which is your digital resilience, which tells you that you have a complete proactive view of your network so that you can have a good model, you can prioritize vulnerabilities, you'll understand your attack paths. Segmentation is key when you look at zero trust, and especially when you're dealing with ransomware threats, making sure that your network is properly segmented to both meet those threats and also even compliance requirements. So we can constantly test the segmentation by updating the model. And then finally, whatever compliance checks you're doing. So if those compliance checks are CIS checks, business practice checks, DISA-STIGs checks, or PCI compliance, those things are the benefits of having a complete model and an up-to-date RedSeal system.
What an absolute no-brainer. I hope everybody watching calls you tomorrow or today.
I hope so.
I mean, this is the kind of thing you should be doing. This is not doesn't strike me as an optional sort of thing.
It
crazy
is,
not to be doing this.
I consider it foundational in your risk program. And in the days of cyber insurance, being able to prove to an insurer that you have an understanding of your network and that you're able to be compliant and meet audits, I think helps you in the area of cyber insurance.
We need to go convince them to give a little break for this kind of
That's
thing.
right.
That's got to be our next talk.
Yeah.
What did we not cover? I traveled through a bunch of different topics here. Anything important that we didn't cover that we should cover before we close?
Well, I think I just say that the team at RedSeal is very important to the solution. I mean, we're about being a part of your program, so you can count on the RedSeal team to show up and to understand networking and cyber threats. And so I'm going to make a plug for the team.
Well, they got a nice CEO as well.
Thank you, Ed.
I appreciate
it's a pleasure
you
to
coming
be here.
by. Let's check back in soon.
Thank you.
Very good. And for the rest of you watching, we'll see you next time.